Emma Carter sat behind the counter at First National Bank, her hands resting lightly on the keyboard in front of her. It was a quiet Tuesday morning, and she had been working as a bank teller for just over 2 weeks. The job was new to her, but she liked it. She enjoyed helping people and learning how things worked in the world of banking. Still, there were moments when she felt unsure of herself. This was one of those moments. The door to the bank opened with a soft chime, and an elderly man walked in. He moved slowly, leaning slightly on a cane, but his presence filled the room. His suit was perfectly tailored, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. A younger man followed him, tall and lean, scrolling through his phone without looking up. Emma glanced at them, then quickly returned her attention to the screen in front of her. She didn't recognize either of them, though something about the older man's confident stride made her think he might be important. "Good morning," Emma said brightly, as the pair approached her window. "How can I help you today?" The older man stopped directly in front of her station and looked down at her with sharp eyes. "I'd like to make a withdrawal," he said in a voice that carried authority. Emma nodded and smiled. "Of course. May I have your account information, please?" He handed her a checkbook, his movements precise and deliberate. Emma flipped it open and entered the details into the system. As the numbers appeared on her screen, her smile faltered. The amount written on the check was staggering: $50,000. Her heart skipped a beat. That was far more than any withdrawal she had processed so far. She hesitated, glancing at the security camera above her head, then back at the man. "I'm sorry, sir," she began carefully, "but for a transaction this large, I'll need to verify some additional information. Do you mind answering a few questions?" The man's eyebrows shot up. "Questions about what?" Emma swallowed hard. "Just standard procedure, sir. For example, can you confirm your date of birth?" The man stared at her for a long moment before replying. "Young lady, do you know who I am?" Emma blinked. "No, sir, I don't." "Well, let me introduce myself," he said, his tone growing colder. "My name is Henry Whitmore. Perhaps you've heard of me." Emma shook her head. "I'm afraid not, Mr. Whitmore, but regardless of who you are, we're required to follow certain protocols for large transactions." Henry's jaw tightened. Clearly, he wasn't used to being questioned or challenged. Behind him, the younger man finally looked up from his phone. He smirked faintly, clearly amused by the exchange unfolding before him. Emma noticed, but tried to focus on the task at hand. "I'll need to see a photo ID as well," she continued, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. "And I'll have to call my supervisor to approve the transaction." Henry's face darkened. "This is ridiculous," he muttered under his breath. "Absolutely absurd." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek leather wallet, producing a driver's license with a flick of his wrist. "Here, take it." Emma accepted the ID and compared it to the photo on file. Everything matched, but she still needed approval from her supervisor. Unfortunately, Rachel Dawson, the branch manager, was currently in a meeting and unavailable. Emma explained this to Henry, who sighed loudly and tapped his cane against the floor in frustration. "Young woman," he said, leaning closer to the counter, "I assure you I am exactly who I say I am. I've been banking here for decades. Surely you can trust me." "I understand, sir," Emma replied, trying to sound polite but firm. "But these rules exist to protect everyone, including you." Henry straightened up, glaring at her. "Fine. Do what you must. But I expect this matter to be resolved promptly." "Yes, sir," Emma said, nodding. She picked up the phone and dialed Rachel's extension, keeping one eye on Henry as she waited for her supervisor to answer. The younger man leaned casually against the counter, watching the scene unfold with obvious amusement. Emma couldn't help but notice the contrast between the two men, the older one brimming with irritation, the younger one radiating indifference. After what felt like an eternity, Rachel finally answered. Emma explained the situation briefly, and Rachel assured her she would come down as soon as possible. Relieved, Emma hung up and turned back to Henry. "My supervisor will be here shortly." "Sir, Thank you for your patience. Henry grunted in response, crossing his arms over his chest. The younger man chuckled softly, earning a sharp glance from Henry. Something funny, Jack? Henry snapped. Jack shrugged. Not really, Grandpa. Just enjoying the show. Emma's ears perked up at the word Grandpa, so they were related. That explained why Jack seemed so relaxed. He probably knew Henry's temper all too well. Emma forced herself to stay focused, though her mind raced with curiosity. Who were these people? And why did Henry seem so offended by her insistence on following protocol? A few minutes later, Rachel arrived, her heels clicking briskly against the tiled floor. She greeted Henry warmly, apologizing profusely for the inconvenience. After reviewing the paperwork, she approved the transaction and handed Henry a receipt. He snatched it from her hand, muttering something under his breath about incompetence, then turned on his heel and strode toward the exit. Jack lingered for a moment longer, flashing Emma a quick grin before following his grandfather out the door. As soon as they were gone, Emma slumped back in her chair, letting out a shaky breath. Rachel gave her a sympathetic look. "Don't worry about it," she said gently. "You did everything right. Some customers are just difficult." Emma nodded, though she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd somehow made a mistake. Little did she know, this encounter was only the beginning of a much bigger problem. Later that afternoon, rumors began circulating among the staff. Someone mentioned that Henry Whitmore wasn't just any customer. He was one of the wealthiest clients the bank had ever served. Apparently, he owned half the real estate in town and donated millions to charity every year. When Emma heard this, her stomach sank. She hadn't meant to embarrass him, she'd only been doing her job. But now, she couldn't help wondering if she'd crossed a line she didn't even know existed. As the day drew to a close, Emma packed up her things and prepared to leave. She stepped outside into the cool evening air, replaying the morning's events in her mind. What had started as a routine day at work had turned into something far more complicated. She didn't realize it yet, but her life was about to change in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. The next morning, Emma arrived at the bank feeling uneasy. She couldn't stop thinking about Henry Whitmore and how angry he had seemed the day before. The rumors she'd overheard about him being one of the bank's most important clients only made her feel worse. What if he decided to close his accounts? What if he complained to the higher-ups? The thought of losing her job, or causing trouble for her co-workers, was enough to make her stomach churn. When she walked into the branch, the atmosphere felt different. Her colleagues were whispering to each other in low voices, glancing at her when they thought she wasn't looking. Rachel Dawson, the branch manager, was already waiting for her near the teller counter. Her expression was serious, almost grim. "Emma," Rachel said as soon as Emma approached. "We need to talk." Emma's heart sank. "Is everything okay?" Rachel hesitated, then gestured toward her office. "Let's go inside." Once they were seated, Rachel explained what had happened. Henry Whitmore had called corporate headquarters early that morning. He wasn't just upset, he was furious. He claimed that Emma's behavior had been unprofessional and disrespectful, and he demanded an apology. Worse, he threatened to withdraw all of his assets from the bank unless action was taken against her. "He says this is unacceptable," Rachel continued, rubbing her temples. "He wants you fired, Emma." Emma stared at her, stunned. "But I was just following the rules. You told me yourself that we have to verify large transactions." "I know," Rachel said quickly. "And you did exactly what you were supposed to do. But Henry Whitmore isn't just any client. He's someone who can cause a lot of problems for us if he decides to pull his money. Losing him would be catastrophic for the bank." Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them away, trying to stay calm. "So what happens now?" "For now," Rachel said, "you're suspended pending investigation. I'm sorry, Emma, I truly am. But until we figure out how to handle this situation, there's nothing else I can do." Emma nodded numbly. She knew Rachel was doing her best, but it didn't make the news any easier to hear. Suspended? Because she followed the rules? It didn't seem fair. After leaving Rachel's office, Emma tried to focus on her work, but it was impossible. Every time she looked up, she saw her co-workers avoiding her gaze or whispering behind her back. Some of them gave her sympathetic smiles, but others looked annoyed, as if her mistake was somehow their problem too. By lunchtime, she couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed her coat and headed outside, needing fresh air to clear her head. As she walked through the quiet streets, Emma replayed the conversation with Henry in her mind. Maybe she should have handled things differently. Maybe she should have apologized right away instead of sticking so rigidly to the rules. But no matter how many times she went over it, she couldn't shake the feeling that she hadn't done anything wrong. Rules existed for a reason, to protect everyone involved. Why should she be punished for enforcing them? By the time she got home, Emma had made up her mind. She couldn't just sit back and let this happen. If Henry Whitmore wanted an apology, she would give him one, but not because she thought she deserved to be blamed. She wanted to show him that she wasn't afraid to face him, even if he was rich and powerful. The next day, after work, Emma drove to the address she'd found online for Henry Whitmore. It turned out to be a sprawling mansion surrounded by manicured lawns and tall iron gates. As she parked her car along the curb, she felt a wave of nerves wash over her. This was ridiculous. She didn't belong here. But she reminded herself why she'd come, to fix this mess, to prove she wasn't some careless employee who didn't care about her job. Before she could change her mind, Emma stepped out of the car and approached the gate. A security camera perched above the entrance swiveled toward her, and a voice crackled through a speaker. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Mr. Whitmore," Emma said, trying to sound confident. "My name is Emma Carter." There was a pause, then the gate buzzed open. Emma took a deep breath and walked up the driveway, her heels clicking softly against the pavement. When she reached the front door, it swung open before she could knock. Standing there was Jack Whitmore, the younger man who had accompanied Henry to the bank. He looked surprised to see her. "You again?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "What are you doing here?" Emma swallowed hard. "I came to apologize to your grandfather." Jack studied her for a moment, then stepped aside to let her in. "Good luck with that," he muttered under his breath. Inside, the house was even more impressive than it had looked from the outside. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, and marble floors gleamed beneath expensive rugs. Soft music played in the background, and the faint hum of conversation drifted from another room. Emma realized belatedly that there was a party going on. "Wait here," Jack said, disappearing down a hallway. Emma stood awkwardly in the grand foyer, feeling completely out of place. People wandered past her, dressed in designer clothes and holding champagne flutes. They glanced at her curiously, clearly wondering who she was and why she was there. Emma kept her head down, clutching her purse tightly. A few minutes later, Jack returned, followed by Henry Whitmore. The older man looked even more imposing in his own home, his sharp features framed by the opulent surroundings. His eyes narrowed as he spotted Emma. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his tone icy. Emma straightened up, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Mr. Whitmore, I came to apologize. I realize my actions yesterday may have caused you inconvenience, and I'm truly sorry for that." Henry crossed his arms over his chest. "Inconvenience, is that what you call it? I'll tell you what it was. It was insulting. You treated me like a criminal." "That wasn't my intention," Emma said quickly. "I was only following protocol. I didn't mean to embarrass you." "Well, you succeeded," Henry snapped, "and your apology is meaningless. Too little, too late." Emma felt her cheeks burn with shame, but she refused to back down. "I understand if you're upset, but I hope you can see that I was just doing my job. I didn't single you out. I would have asked anyone those questions." Henry scoffed. "Don't bother trying to justify yourself. The damage is done." Behind him, Jack watched silently, his expression unreadable. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Emma thought she saw a flicker of sympathy in his gaze. But then Jack looked away, leaving her alone to face his grandfather's wrath. Feeling defeated, Emma nodded. "Thank you for hearing me out, Mr. Whitmore. I won't take up any more of your time." Without waiting for a response, she turned and hurried toward the door. As she stepped outside, the cool evening air hit her face, and she let out a shaky breath. She had tried her best, but it hadn't been enough. Henry Whitmore wasn't interested in apologies or fairness. All he cared about was power. Unbeknownst to Emma, Henry wasn't finished yet. Later that night, he contacted his lawyers and filed a formal complaint against the bank, not just demanding compensation for emotional distress, but also threatening to withdraw all his assets unless Emma was fired immediately. It was a calculated move designed to intimidate the bank into submission, and unfortunately for Emma, it worked. The very next morning, Rachel called Emma into her office again. This time, the news was even worse. "Corporate has made a decision," Rachel said, her voice heavy with regret. "They've decided to terminate your employment effective immediately. I fought for you, Emma, but there was nothing I could do." Emma sat there in stunned silence, unable to believe what she was hearing. She had lost her job, all because she had followed the rules. It wasn't fair, but there was nothing she could do to change it. As she packed up her belongings and left the bank for the last time, Emma felt a mix of anger, frustration, and fear. She didn't know what she was going to do next. But one thing was certain: she wasn't going to let Henry Whitmore destroy her life without a fight. Emma walked out of the bank with a heavy heart, her arms full of the few personal items she'd kept at her desk. The weight of the box felt like nothing compared to the crushing disappointment she carried inside. She had done everything right. Followed the rules, been polite, even apologized, but none of it mattered. Henry Whitmore's influence was too great, and she was just an ordinary person caught in the crossfire. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, the cool breeze did little to calm her racing thoughts. Her mind swirled with questions. How was she going to pay her bills? What would her sick mother say when she found out Emma had lost her job? Most importantly, how could anyone let someone so powerful get away with treating people this way? Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was Mia Roberts, her best friend since childhood. Emma hesitated for a moment before answering. She didn't want to burden Mia with her problems, but she knew she couldn't keep them bottled up forever. "Hey," Mia said cheerfully when Emma picked up. "How's work?" Emma sighed. I don't have a job anymore." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What? What happened?" Emma explained everything: the confrontation with Henry Whitmore, the suspension, her failed attempt to apologize, and finally her termination. By the time she finished, her voice was trembling with emotion. "That's insane," Mia said firmly. "You didn't do anything wrong. He's bullying you because he can." "I know," Emma replied, tears welling up in her eyes. "But knowing, that doesn't make it any easier. I don't know what to do next." Mia didn't hesitate. "We fight back. You can't let him win." "How?" Emma asked, her voice cracking. "He's rich, powerful, and connected. No one's going to stand up to him." "We will," Mia said confidently. "People love a good underdog story. If we tell your side of things, people will listen. Trust me." At first, Emma wasn't convinced. Going public seemed risky, especially since Henry Whitmore clearly had resources to retaliate. But Mia refused to give up. Over the next few days, she helped Emma craft a plan. They decided to launch a social media campaign called Fair for Emma, sharing Emma's story and appealing for justice. They posted photos of Emma at work, testimonials from co-workers who supported her, and detailed accounts of what had happened during her encounter with Henry Whitmore. To their surprise, the response was overwhelming. Within hours, the hashtag started trending locally. People were outraged by Henry's behavior and impressed by Emma's courage. Local news outlets picked up the story, framing it as a David versus Goliath battle between a hardworking young woman and a wealthy bully. Reporters reached out to Emma for interviews, and soon her face was appearing on TV screens across the region. Meanwhile, Jack Whitmore watched the unfolding drama from afar. At first, he had dismissed Emma's apology as meaningless, a desperate attempt to save her job. But as the story gained traction, he began to feel uneasy. He saw the videos of Emma speaking calmly and respectfully about what had happened, never once attacking his grandfather personally. She came across as genuine, humble, and brave. Curious, Jack started researching Emma online. He discovered that she worked 2 jobs to support her mother, who suffered from chronic illness. He read old articles about her volunteering at community centers and helping organize fundraisers for families in need. The more he learned, the guiltier he felt. His grandfather's actions suddenly seemed petty and cruel, especially compared to Emma's quiet determination. One evening, Jack confronted Henry in his study. The older man sat behind a massive oak desk, poring over financial documents. When Jack entered, he glanced up briefly before returning his attention to the papers. "What is it now?" Henry asked impatiently. "It's about Emma Carter," Jack said, crossing his arms. "Have you seen what's happening online?" Henry waved a hand dismissively. "Let them rant. It'll blow over." "No, it won't," Jack shot back. "People are calling you out for being unreasonable. They're saying you're using your money to punish someone who made a simple mistake. Does that really sound like the kind of legacy you want to leave behind?" Henry slammed his fist on the desk. "Enough. This has nothing to do with legacies or reputations. That girl disrespected me in front of everyone. She needs to learn. There are consequences for her actions." Jack shook his head. "You're missing the point, Grandpa. She followed the rules. You're the one throwing a tantrum because you didn't get your way. And honestly, it's embarrassing." For a moment, Henry looked stunned. Then his expression hardened. "Watch your tone, boy. You don't understand how the world works." "I understand enough," Jack retorted. "I see what you're doing, and it's wrong. Maybe it's time you stopped acting like the king of the world and started treating people with some respect." With that, Jack turned and left the room, leaving Henry fuming. For the first time in years, Henry felt a twinge of doubt. Was he really being unreasonable? Or was he simply enforcing standards that others had forgotten? While Henry wrestled with his conscience, Emma faced mounting pressure at home. Bills piled up, and without a steady income, she struggled to keep up with payments. Her mother, unaware of the full extent of the situation, grew increasingly worried about her daughter's stress levels. "You're working too hard," her mother said one evening, as they sat together at the kitchen table. "You look exhausted." Emma forced a smile. "I'm fine, Mom. Just trying to figure out my next move." Her mother studied her for a moment, then reached across the table to take her hand. "Whatever happens, we'll get through it together. Don't forget that." Emma nodded, blinking back tears. Her mother's words gave her strength, reminding her why she had fought so hard in the first place. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her family, for fairness, for the belief that everyone deserved to be treated with dignity. Determined to keep moving forward, Emma continued working with Mia to amplify their message. They organized a small rally outside the bank, inviting supporters to speak out against corporate greed and abuse of power. Dozens of people showed up, holding signs and chanting slogans. Cameras captured every moment, ensuring the story stayed in the spotlight. Back at the bank, Rachel Dawson watched the coverage with growing unease. Corporate headquarters had initially backed Henry Whitmore's demands, but public opinion was shifting rapidly. Customers began withdrawing their own accounts in solidarity with Emma, and employees staged informal protests during breaks. The pressure became too much to ignore. Finally, Rachel called Emma. "Emma," she began hesitantly, "we've reviewed the situation again. Given the circumstances and the overwhelming support you've received, we've decided to reinstate you. We're offering you a promotion and a raise to compensate for the hardship you've endured." Emma listened in disbelief. "Are you serious?" "Yes," Rachel said. "You've shown incredible resilience, and we want to make things right. Will you come back?" Emma hesitated. Part of her wanted to refuse, to walk away from a place that had betrayed her trust. But another part knew this was an opportunity to create real change from within. After a long pause, she agreed. When Emma returned to work, she was greeted with applause from her colleagues. Rachel publicly apologized for failing to stand by her earlier, promising to implement new policies to prevent similar situations in the future. For the first time in weeks, Emma felt a glimmer of hope. But the battle wasn't over yet. Henry Whitmore still loomed large, his pride wounded and his reputation tarnished. And while Emma had won this round, she knew the war for justice was far from finished. Emma's return to the bank felt surreal. The same building that had once been a source of stress and humiliation was now filled with smiling faces and supportive words. Her coworkers greeted her warmly, some even bringing small gifts like coffee, mugs, or handwritten notes of encouragement. Rachel Dawson made a point to personally introduce Emma to the new team she'd be leading as part of her promotion. It was a role she hadn't expected, but one she decided to embrace fully. Despite the warm welcome, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that this victory wasn't complete. Henry Whitmore was still out there, and while public opinion had turned against him, he remained a powerful man with deep pockets. She knew better than to think he would simply fade away without a fight. Still, for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to breathe easier. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to look up. Jack Whitmore, on the other hand, was struggling to reconcile his feelings about the situation. He had always admired his grandfather's success, but recent events had forced him to confront uncomfortable truths. Henry's actions during the bank incident and his refusal to back down despite the backlash had revealed a side of him Jack didn't recognize. For years, Jack had assumed his grandfather was untouchable, a self-made titan who deserved respect no matter what. But watching Emma stand her ground, even when it cost her everything, made Jack question whether power truly excused cruelty. One afternoon, Jack found himself sitting alone in his grandfather's library, surrounded by shelves lined with leather-bound books and framed photographs of Henry shaking hands with politicians and celebrities. He picked up an old photo album and flipped through its pages, searching for clues about the man his grandfather used to be before wealth changed him. As he stared at faded images of a younger Henry laughing with friends and family, Jack felt a pang of sadness. Somewhere along the way, that version of Henry had disappeared. His thoughts drifted to Emma. She wasn't extraordinary in the traditional sense. She wasn't rich, famous, or particularly outspoken. But there was something undeniably admirable about her resilience. She had faced impossible odds and refused to give up even when the world seemed stacked against her. Jack realized he wanted to be more like her, someone who stood up for what was right regardless of the consequences. Determined to make amends, Jack began digging into his grandfather's business dealings. Growing up, he had always avoided asking too many questions about where Henry's money came from. Now, however, he couldn't ignore the nagging suspicion that some of it might have been acquired dishonestly. Late at night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Jack snuck into Henry's home office and sifted through filing cabinets, looking for anything suspicious. It didn't take long to find something damning. Buried beneath stacks of financial reports were documents detailing illegal activities, tax evasion schemes, fraudulent real estate deals, and bribes paid to government officials. Jack's stomach churned as he read through the files. This wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. His grandfather had built his empire not just on hard work, but also on corruption. Jack wrestled with what to do next. Exposing these documents would destroy Henry's reputation, and possibly their relationship. But keeping quiet meant complicity. After hours of deliberation, Jack decided to act. He reached out to Emma through social media, sending her a private message explaining what he had uncovered. "I know we haven't exactly gotten off on the right foot," he wrote, "but I want to help you. If you're willing to trust me, I can give you evidence that will turn the tables." Emma read the message several times, unsure if she should believe it. Could Jack really be trusted? Or was this some kind of trap set by Henry to discredit her further? She confided in Mia, who urged caution, but reminded her that they couldn't afford to ignore potential allies. "Just meet him," Mia advised. "Hear him out. Worst case scenario, you walk away empty-handed." The next evening, Emma agreed to meet Jack at a quiet cafe near the bank. When she arrived, he was already seated at a corner table, nervously tapping his fingers against a folder in front of him. He looked up as she approached, offering a hesitant smile. "Thanks for coming," he said. "I wasn't sure you'd show." "I wasn't sure I should," Emma admitted, sliding into the seat across from him. "Why are you doing this?" Jack hesitated, then sighed. "Because my grandfather crossed a line. What he did to you was wrong, and I can't stand by and watch him ruin your life, or anyone else's for that matter." He pushed the folder toward her. Inside were copies of the incriminating documents he had found. Emma skimmed through them, her eyes widening as she processed the implications. These weren't minor infractions, they were serious crimes that could land Henry in prison. "This is huge," she murmured, looking up at Jack. "Are you sure about this?" "I'm sure," Jack replied firmly. "But I need you to understand something. Once this goes public, there's no going back for either of us." Emma nodded slowly. She knew the risks involved, but she also knew she couldn't let this opportunity slip away. If these documents were legitimate, and she had no reason to doubt they were, they could finally hold Henry accountable for his actions. Over the next few days, Emma worked with Mia to verify the authenticity of the documents. They consulted legal experts and journalists, ensuring they had a solid case before taking any action. Meanwhile, Jack distanced himself from his grandfather, knowing their relationship would never be the same. Though it pained him to betray Henry, he felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in his life, he was standing on the right side of history. When everything was ready, Emma contacted local law enforcement and handed over the evidence. Investigators moved quickly, raiding Henry's properties and seizing computers, ledgers, and other materials related to the alleged crimes. News of the investigation broke overnight, sending shockwaves through the community. Reporters camped outside Henry's mansion, capturing every moment as authorities carted boxes of documents to waiting vans. Henry, blindsided by the sudden exposure, lashed out at anyone he suspected of betrayal, including Jack. "You did this!" he shouted during a heated confrontation. "You betrayed me!" "I didn't do anything you didn't deserve," Jack shot back. "This isn't about revenge, Grandpa. It's about justice." For the first time in decades, Henry Whitmore found himself powerless. His lawyers scrambled to negotiate plea deals, but the mountain of evidence against him was overwhelming. Charges of tax fraud, embezzlement, and bribery piled up, leaving him little choice but to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences. As the scandal unfolded, public opinion shifted dramatically. People who had once revered Henry as a philanthropist and pillar of the community now saw him as a symbol of unchecked greed and corruption. Emma became a local hero, praised for her courage and integrity. The bank, eager to distance itself from the controversy, issued a statement supporting her efforts and promising transparency moving forward. Though vindicated, Emma remained humble. She gave interviews and attended press conferences, always emphasizing the importance of fairness and accountability. "This isn't about me versus him," she said during one appearance. "It's about making sure everyone plays by the same rules no matter who they are." Behind the scenes, Jack struggled to mend fences with his grandfather. Despite everything, he still cared about Henry and hoped they could rebuild their relationship someday. For now, though, he focused on carving out his own path. Inspired by Emma's determination, he began working as a freelance journalist, exposing corruption and advocating for change. As the dust settled, Emma reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. She had started as an ordinary bank teller, following the rules and hoping to make ends meet. Now she was a leader, a symbol of hope for those fighting against injustice. While the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, she felt ready to face whatever challenges came her way. One evening, as she sat on her porch watching the sunset, Emma thought about all the people who had supported her: Mia, Rachel, even Jack. She realized she wasn't alone anymore. Together, they had proven that even the smallest voices could spark big changes. And for the first time in a long time, Emma felt truly hopeful about the future. The weeks that followed Henry Whitmore's arrest were a whirlwind of activity. Reporters swarmed the streets outside his mansion, hungry for updates on the case. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, some shocked by the revelations, others unsurprised given Henry's reputation for arrogance and entitlement. Meanwhile, Emma Carter found herself at the center of it all, a reluctant hero thrust into the spotlight. Everywhere she went, people recognized her. Strangers approached her, in grocery stores and coffee shops to thank her for standing up to someone so powerful. Local businesses hung signs in their windows supporting her, and community leaders invited her to speak at events about fairness and justice. At first, the attention overwhelmed her. She wasn't used to being the focus of so much admiration. But as time passed, she began to embrace her role, not because she wanted fame, but because she saw an opportunity to make a difference. At the bank, things were slowly returning to normal, or at least as normal as they could be after such a dramatic upheaval. Rachel Dawson worked tirelessly to rebuild trust with customers and employees, implementing new policies designed to prevent similar situations in the future. Emma took her responsibilities as a supervisor seriously, mentoring newer staff members and encouraging them to prioritize integrity over fear of conflict. Her team respected her not just for what she had endured, but for how she handled herself afterward. Jack Whitmore, meanwhile, struggled to navigate his complicated feelings about his grandfather. Though he had helped expose Henry's crimes, he couldn't bring himself to cut ties completely. Every few days he visited Henry in his lawyer's office or at home, sitting silently while Henry raged about betrayal and injustice. Sometimes Jack tried to reason with him, pointing out that none of this would have happened if Henry had simply apologized to Emma instead of escalating the situation. Other times, he listened quietly, letting Henry vent without judgment. "I didn't raise you to stab me in the back," Henry spat during one particularly heated argument. "You're supposed to be my blood." "And I'm supposed to do what's right," Jack shot back. "What you did to Emma and to countless others was wrong. You can't keep blaming everyone else for your mistakes." Henry glared at him, his face red with anger. "You'll regret this. Mark my words." Despite the tension between them, Jack refused to give up. He knew repairing their relationship would take time, maybe even years, but he believed it was worth trying. In the meantime, he threw himself into his work as a freelance journalist. Inspired by Emma's courage, he started investigating other cases of corporate corruption, using his family name and connections to dig deeper than most reporters could. His articles gained traction quickly, earning praise from readers and colleagues alike. Emma noticed the change in Jack whenever they crossed paths. They weren't close friends. She still felt wary of him sometimes, but she respected the effort he was making to atone for his grandfather's actions. Occasionally, they exchanged messages, updating each other on developments related to the case. Once, when Jack published an exposé about shady real estate deals linked to Henry's company, Emma sent him a simple text. "Good job." It meant more to Jack than she realized. As the legal proceedings against Henry dragged on, Emma focused on rebuilding her life. With her promotion came a significant pay raise, which allowed her to catch up on bills and ease some of the financial strain on her family. Her mother, though still dealing with health issues, seemed happier knowing her daughter was finally being treated fairly. On weekends, Emma spent hours helping Mia organize charity events aimed at supporting low-income families in their community. Together, they raised thousands of dollars, proving that even small acts of kindness could create big impacts. One evening, as Emma sat on her couch flipping through TV channels, she stumbled upon a news segment about Henry's trial. Prosecutors had presented mountains of evidence tying him to decades of illegal activities, including tax evasion, bribery, and fraudulent business practices. Defense attorneys argued that Henry had been a victim of circumstance, claiming he had simply followed advice from trusted advisors. But the jury wasn't convinced. After weeks of deliberation, they returned a guilty verdict on multiple counts. Watching the announcement, Emma felt a mix of emotions: relief, satisfaction, sadness. It was hard to untangle them all. Part of her wished the whole ordeal had never happened. Another part knew it had forced her to grow stronger and more resilient. She thought about Henry, now facing the prospect of prison, stripped of his wealth and influence. Was this justice? Or was it punishment? Her phone buzzed, interrupting. Her thoughts It was Jack. He got what he deserved, the message read. No excuses this time. Emma stared at the screen for a moment before replying. I hope he learned something from this. Maybe it's not too late for him to change. Jack didn't respond right away, but when he did, his tone was thoughtful. I think he's too stubborn to admit he was wrong, but I'll keep trying to reach him. Someone has to. Emma smiled faintly. Despite everything, Jack's determination reminded her of her own unwillingness to give up, even when the odds seemed impossible. Maybe there was hope for Henry after all, not because he deserved redemption, but because Jack cared enough to fight for it. The fallout from the scandal continued to ripple through the community. Some of Henry's former business partners distanced themselves publicly, eager to avoid association with his tarnished legacy. Others faced scrutiny of their own dealings, leading to additional investigations. The domino effect surprised no one more than Emma, who had never imagined her decision to follow protocol would spark such widespread change. At the same time, she remained grounded. Fame hadn't changed her priorities. She still woke up early, every morning, brewed a pot of coffee, and headed to work with the same quiet determination she'd always had. Her co-workers admired her for it, often joking that she was the only person unaffected by the chaos swirling around her. One day, as she walked through the bank lobby, a young teller stopped her. Ms. Carter? The woman asked shyly. Can I ask you something? Of course, Emma replied, smiling warmly. What do you do when you're scared? Like really scared? How do you keep going? Emma paused, considering the question. Honestly, she said after a moment, I remind myself why I'm doing it. If it's the right thing, then it's worth fighting for, even if it's hard. The teller nodded, clearly moved. Thank you. That helps. Later that night, as Emma reflected on the conversation, she realized how far she'd come since her first day at the bank. Back then, she had been unsure of herself, afraid of making mistakes. Now she stood tall, confident in her ability to handle whatever challenges came her way. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had taught her invaluable lessons about resilience, fairness, and the power of standing up for what you believe in. As she drifted off to sleep, Emma thought about the future. There would undoubtedly be more obstacles ahead. Life rarely handed anyone smooth sailing. But she felt ready to face them. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't just surviving. She was thriving. And she knew, deep down, that no matter what happened next, she would continue to fight for justice, not just for herself but for everyone who deserved a fair chance. Though the storm surrounding Henry Whitmore had passed, its effects lingered. The community had changed, becoming more aware of the dangers of unchecked power and privilege. People like Emma and Jack had shown that ordinary individuals could make extraordinary differences when they refused to stay silent. And while the scars of the past might never fully heal, they served as reminders of the importance of integrity, accountability, and compassion. For Emma, the road ahead was bright. She had weathered the worst and emerged stronger than ever. Whatever challenges lay in wait, she knew she wouldn't face them alone. Months passed and life in the small town began to settle into a new rhythm. The scandal surrounding Henry Whitmore faded from the headlines, replaced by other stories vying for public attention. But the impact of what had happened lingered, shaping the community in subtle yet profound ways. People talked less about wealth and status and more about fairness and accountability. It was as if Emma Carter's stand against one of the most powerful men in town had sparked a quiet revolution, a shift toward valuing integrity over influence. For Emma, the changes were both personal and professional. At the bank, she continued to lead her team with kindness and determination. She encouraged open communication, making sure everyone felt comfortable asking questions or raising concerns. Her approach earned her respect not only from her colleagues but also from customers who appreciated her genuine care and professionalism. Some even joked that Emma had single-handedly restored faith in banking, an exaggeration perhaps, but one that made her smile. Outside of work, Emma found herself busier than ever. Community leaders sought her advice on projects aimed at helping underserved populations. Local schools invited her to speak to students about perseverance and standing up for what's right. Though she never considered herself a role model, she embraced the opportunity to share her story, hoping it might inspire others to believe in their own strength. One Saturday morning, Emma stood in front of a classroom of high school seniors, answering questions about her experience with Henry Whitmore. A shy girl in the back raised her hand hesitantly. "Did you ever feel like giving up?" she asked. Emma thought for a moment before responding. "Yes," she admitted. "There were days when I didn't think I could keep going, but I reminded myself why I was fighting, not just for me but for my mom, for my friends, for anyone who feels powerless, and that kept me going." The girl nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer. After the session ended, several students approached Emma to thank her. One boy handed her a folded piece of paper. "This is for you," he said quietly. Inside was a note. "Thank you for showing us we can make a difference." Emma tucked it into her pocket, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Jack Whitmore's life also underwent significant transformation. Free from his grandfather's shadow, he dedicated himself to uncovering corruption wherever he found it. His articles gained national recognition, earning him awards and speaking engagements across the country. Yet despite his growing fame, Jack remained humble, often crediting Emma for inspiring him to take action. Whenever reporters asked about his motivations, he spoke candidly about how meeting Emma had changed his perspective on privilege and responsibility. Though their paths crossed less frequently now, Emma and Jack maintained a friendly connection. They occasionally met for coffee to discuss ongoing developments in Henry's case or updates on Jack's latest investigations. During one such meeting, Jack mentioned that Henry had agreed to attend counseling sessions as part of his plea deal. "He says it's a waste of time," Jack admitted, "but I think it's a step in the right direction." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe someday he'll see that it's okay to admit when you're wrong." "I hope so," Jack replied. "But even if he doesn't, I'm glad I tried." As the months turned into a year, Henry Whitmore became a distant figure in the town's memory. Stripped of his fortune and freedom, he retreated from public life, living quietly under house arrest while awaiting sentencing. Some residents pitied him, seeing his downfall as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition. Others viewed it as poetic justice, proof that no one was above the law. Emma rarely thought about Henry anymore. When she did, it wasn't with anger or resentment, but with a sense of closure. She had done everything she could to hold him accountable, and now it was time to focus on moving forward. Her mother's health had improved slightly thanks to better medical care funded by Emma's higher salary, and their relationship grew stronger with each passing day. On weekends, they spent hours cooking together, laughing over old family recipes and reminiscing about happier times. Mia remained a constant source of support, celebrating Emma's victories and offering comfort during moments of doubt. Together, they organized fundraisers, volunteered at shelters, and brainstormed ideas for initiatives to help struggling families in the area. Their partnership was a testament to the power of friendship, proving that having someone who believed in you could make all the difference. One crisp autumn afternoon, Emma decided to visit the park where she used to play as a child. The leaves had begun to turn shades of gold and crimson, carpeting the ground in color. As she strolled along the winding paths, she noticed a familiar face sitting on a bench overlooking the lake. It was Jack. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, smiling. "Not at all," he replied, scooting over to make room. "I figured you'd show up here eventually." Emma laughed. "What makes you say that?" "You strike me as someone who finds peace in places like this," Jack said. "Quiet spots where you can think without distractions." She sat down beside him, gazing out at the water. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the rustling of leaves and the occasional chirp of birds. Finally, Jack broke the quiet. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if none of this had gone down? If you'd just let my grandfather walk away that day?" Emma shook her head. "No." Because I wouldn't be the person I am today. None of us would. Jack nodded slowly. You're right. Sometimes I forget how much things have changed, not just for you, but for me too. They sat there for a long time, watching the sun dip below the horizon. As darkness fell, Emma felt a deep sense of gratitude for the people who had supported her, for the lessons she had learned, and for the chance to start anew. Life hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. When they finally stood to leave, Jack turned to her with a grin. So, what's next for Emma Carter, hero of the hour? Emma chuckled. Just Emma Carter, still figuring it out.